Los Angeles, the city of dreams. Not for everyone. Dressed in ragged clothes, his hair unkempt, Keanu Reeves walked the crowded streets, blending in with those society ignored. He wasn't just playing a role, he was on a mission to see the truth, to test how people really treated those with nothing. The destination? A McDonald's, a place where kindness should cost nothing, but often does. What happened next would shake the internet, challenge perspectives, and leave a permanent mark on Keanu's own heart. But before we dive into this unbelievable story, where are you watching from? Hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we've got another life-changing story just for you. Keanu sat on a worn-out park bench, watching the world rush by. He saw it everywhere, people too busy to care. Too distracted to notice the silent struggles around them. He'd been on both sides, famous and forgotten, and he knew one thing: kindness was becoming rare. A recent conversation with a friend planted an idea in his mind. What if I stepped into the shoes of the unseen? What if I became invisible to the world and saw how it treated me? And just like that, a plan was born. He threw on a tattered hoodie, scruffed up his beard, and grabbed a plastic bag with a few belongings. He looked at his reflection one last time before stepping onto the streets. Tonight, he wasn't Keanu Reeves. He was just another man struggling to get by. Inside the McDonald's, the world moved as it always did. Families laughed. Exhausted workers grabbed a quick meal, and the smell of fresh fries filled the air. No one noticed when he stepped in, at first. Then the whispers started. People stole quick glances at the disheveled figure walking toward the counter, his clothes wrinkled, his shoes worn out. A few turned away, pretending not to see. Keanu didn't react. He simply walked up to the register, placed a few coins on the counter, and looked at the cashier. "A simple hamburger, please." His voice was calm, steady. "Clara," the cashier hesitated. She glanced at the money. It wasn't enough. A lump formed in her throat. She'd seen people struggle before, but something about him, something was different. "Sir, this isn't enough for a hamburger." Keanu's expression didn't change. He tilted his head slightly, as if he already knew what she would say. "It's all I have." His words were soft but powerful. Clara glanced at the tray behind her, where canceled orders were placed. There was a burger there, untouched, about to be thrown away. A simple gesture could change everything. She reached for it. And then, "What's going on here?" A cold, sharp voice cut through the moment like a blade. The tension in the McDonald's had reached a boiling point. Coleman's rigid posture, his sharp glare, the condescending way he sneered at Keanu, it was all meant to establish dominance. He wanted to make it clear. This was his territory, but Keanu wasn't backing down. The restaurant, once filled with casual chatter and the rhythmic hum of the fryers, had fallen into an eerie silence. Everyone was watching. Employees, customers, even those who had initially avoided the confrontation were now completely invested, because this wasn't just about a burger anymore. This was about power, about dignity, about who gets to decide who is worthy of respect. Clara's hands trembled slightly as she clenched them into fists. "He's a person, that should be enough." Her voice echoed louder than she expected, and it struck a nerve. For the first time that evening, Coleman looked rattled. His authority was being challenged, not just by Keanu, but now by his own employee, someone who was supposed to follow his rules without question. Coleman's face darkened. "Enough of this nonsense. You don't get to decide how this place runs, Clara. I do." He turned his glare back to Keanu. "And you?" He spat, voice dripping with disdain. "Get out." "Now!" Keanu simply stood there, completely unfazed. He tilted his head slightly, as if studying Coleman, as if seeing right through him. Then, in the calmest, most deliberate voice, Keanu asked, "What if I don't?" A few gasps came from the crowd. Clara's breath caught in her throat. Coleman narrowed his eyes. He wasn't used to being challenged like this, especially not by someone he considered beneath him. "Then I'll call security," he threatened, stepping even closer, trying to intimidate Keanu. But Keanu, he didn't even flinch. In fact, he smiled. "Go ahead," Keanu said, voice steady. "Call them." Coleman hesitated. This wasn't the reaction he expected. He wanted submission, obedience, someone who would slink away with their head down. But instead, this man, this so-called a beggar, standing firm. And then Keanu did something no one saw coming. He reached into his pocket. The room tensed. Even Coleman seemed caught off guard. And then He pulled out a $100 bill, a crisp, clean, unmistakable $100 bill. He placed it calmly on the counter, sliding it toward Clara. "I'll take the burger," he said, his voice smooth as ever, "and everything else on the menu, for everyone here." The restaurant erupted. Gasps, murmurs, shocked expressions. Some people even laughed in disbelief. Clara's eyes widened. What was happening? Even Coleman took a step back, completely thrown off. Keanu looked at him again, that same unreadable smile on his lips. "People like me," he repeated, voice laced with irony. That's when it clicked. The realization hit Coleman like a truck, and the color drained from his face. Because he finally recognized who he had been talking down to. People in the restaurant started whispering. A few even pulled out their phones. "Wait a second," a teenage boy muttered. "Is that? No way. Holy she..." One by one, the customers realized the truth. The scruffy man Coleman had treated like dirt, the man he had mocked, humiliated, and ordered to leave, wasn't just anyone. It was Keanu Reeves, the Keanu Reeves, international movie star, beloved icon, a man worth millions. Coleman's face turned red, his confidence shattered. He looked around, seeing the realization spread through the room, seeing the judgment in people's eyes. The balance of power had shifted, and now Coleman was the one on trial. Clara stared at Keanu in awe. "You knew," she whispered. "You knew this would happen." Keanu chuckled softly, shaking his head. "I didn't know exactly what would happen," he admitted, "but I had a feeling." Coleman was still frozen in place, struggling to process everything. He opened his mouth as if to say something, to salvage what little dignity he had left. But Keanu didn't give him the chance. He turned to Clara. "Thank you," he said, sincerity in his voice. "For what?" she asked, still reeling. "For seeing a person, not a problem." Clara felt her throat tighten. Keanu turned back to the stunned customers. He gestured toward the counter. "Eat up, everyone. It's on me." The restaurant erupted into cheers. And Coleman? He just stood there, humiliated as the world he controlled slipped right through his fingers. The restaurant remained in stunned silence. Coleman, still pale, opened and closed his mouth, but no words came. His authority had crumbled. Keanu turned to the crowd, his presence commanding without effort. "This isn't just about a burger," he continued, scanning the faces around him. "It's about how we choose to treat each other. About whether we follow rules blindly or remember that we're all human beings first." The murmurs in the restaurant grew louder. Some customers nodded in agreement. Others whispered excitedly, still processing the fact that Keanu Reeves himself was standing right there. Clara, still shaken but emboldened, straightened her shoulders. "Thank you," she said, her voice steadier now. I couldn't stand by and do nothing." Keanu smiled at her, warm and genuine. "And that," he said, "is exactly what makes the difference." Coleman, meanwhile, was unraveling, his face contorted with frustration, his authority slipping away by the second. The employees behind the counter, who had once stood stiff and silent under his rule, were now looking at him differently. Some of them exchanged glances, a flicker of newfound courage in their eyes. The customers, some recorded the scene, others whispered, but nearly all of them were judging him. Coleman knew it. He felt it. He had to do something. "This is ridiculous," he snapped, trying to regain control. "You're making a scene over nothing. Rules are rules, and if we start letting people just..." But Keanu cut him off. "Let me ask you something, Coleman." The manager flinched slightly at the sound of his own name coming from Keanu Reeves' mouth. Keanu took a slow step closer, his presence overpowering despite his calm demeanor. "What do you think happens next?" Keanu asked, his voice gentle but unmistakably firm. Coleman blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" Keanu gestured around. "Do you really think this moment ends here, that no one will talk about this?" He motioned toward the phone's recording, the customers watching. "By tomorrow morning, the world will know exactly how you treat people." Coleman's face drained of color. It was one thing to enforce company policy, it was another to be publicly exposed as the guy who insulted and kicked out Keanu Reeves while he was undercover because he thought he was homeless. This wasn't just an argument anymore. This was a career-ending moment. Clara realized it too. She saw the way Coleman's breathing changed, the way he swallowed hard as the weight of his actions truly hit him. And for the first time that night, she saw something she hadn't expected to see in his eyes. Fear Coleman had lost. And he knew it. But the question remained, what would he do now? Would he double down, stick to his pride, and let himself become a villain in the eyes of everyone watching? Or would he do something that had never come naturally to him? Would he admit he was wrong? The tension in the air was suffocating as everyone waited for his response. Finally, after what felt like forever, Coleman exhaled sharply and looked away, his jaw clenched. "Fine," he muttered, his voice barely audible. Keanu raised an eyebrow. "Fine?" he echoed. Coleman's fists tightened at his side. Every fiber of his being resisted the words that were forming, but he knew he had no choice. "I was wrong," he said through gritted teeth, "about everything." The restaurant erupted. Some customers clapped, others gasped. Employees exchanged wide-eyed looks. Clara just stared. She had never seen Coleman admit he was wrong. He looked miserable, humiliated, his pride shattered into 1,000 pieces. "But in the end," he said it. "And Keanu," he smiled, not out of victory, not out of arrogance, but because change had just happened before everyone's eyes. But the night wasn't over yet. Keanu turned back to Clara. "So you're out of a job now?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already had something in mind. Clara exhaled, nodding. "Looks like it." Keanu tilted his head, thinking for a second. Then he grinned. "How do you feel about working somewhere that actually values kindness?" Clara blinked. "Wait, what?" Keanu reached into his pocket, pulling out a sleek black business card. "I have a few connections," he said, with a smirk. "I think I can find a place where someone like you, a person who actually cares, will be appreciated." Clara took the card, hands shaking slightly. Was this actually happening? Was Keanu Reeves offering her a job? She looked up at him, still processing. I don't know what to say." Keanu chuckled. "Then don't say anything yet. Just think about it." Clara clutched the card, her entire life shifting in a matter of seconds. Meanwhile, Coleman? He stood off to the side, watching it all unfold, watching as everything slipped away from him. And for the first time in years, he felt something new, regret. The next morning, the video had over 10 million views. Coleman woke up to a storm of headlines. Small Blue Diamond manager publicly humiliates homeless man. Turns out to be Keanu Reeves. Small Blue Diamond McDonald's employee fired for compassion, but Keanu Reeves steps in. Small Blue Diamond fast food controversy. What happened at that McDonald's last night? The world knew. The world was watching. And as the fallout began, one thing became clear. This wasn't just a viral moment. It was a reckoning. Keanu's voice, though quiet, cut through the murmurs of the crowd. Compassion isn't a weakness. It's the foundation of real strength. The restaurant fell silent once more. People absorbed his words, the weight of them settling in. The spontaneous donations piling up at the counter weren't just money. They were a symbol of change, a testament to the kindness that had been buried beneath routine and rules for far too long. Clara wiped her eyes, overwhelmed yet grateful. She had started this, and now? Now it had grown into something bigger than she had ever imagined. Keanu met her gaze one last time. "Keep being you," he said with a knowing smile. Then with a nod, he turned and walked out. The aftershocks of that night rippled far beyond the walls of the restaurant. By morning, the viral videos had exploded across social media. News outlets picked up the story. A Keanu Reeves kindness test exposes manager's harsh reality. The restaurant chain's corporate office had no choice but to respond. Within days, Coleman was removed from his position. But the impact didn't stop there. Inspired by the story, people across the country began paying it forward, buying meals for strangers, supporting food drives, challenging unfair policies at their workplaces. The ripple effect was real. And as for Clara, with the support of the $50,000 gift, she finally pursued her dream, opening a small cafe with a simple yet powerful policy. No one leaves hungry. A sign hung in the window of her cafe, right next to a framed copy of Keanu's check, never cashed, but kept as a reminder. Because the real reward wasn't in the money, it was in what it started. And in knowing that one small act of kindness could change everything, the restaurant was buzzing with quiet conversations and the clinking of silverware, but an uneasy tension hung in the air. All eyes were on Clara as she stood firm, staring directly at Coleman. Her heart pounded, but she refused to back down. She had already pushed her limits, but this was a battle she couldn't walk away from. Shouldn't walk away. "If you can't understand that, then maybe you shouldn't be managing anything at all," she said. her voice unwavering. Coleman's lips parted as if he were about to retaliate, but then silence. For the first time, he seemed lost for words. His face twisted in a mixture of fury and disbelief, while Keanu, who had remained quiet until now, simply observed. The entire restaurant felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for Coleman's response. Whatever he said next would decide everything. Coleman clenched his fists at his sides, his jaw tightening as he stepped closer to Clara, his voice low and seething. "Do you think you can tell me how to do my job?" he asked, leaning in slightly. "Do you think you're above the company's rules?" Clara stood her ground even though her hands trembled at her sides. She took a deep breath, steadying herself before responding. "I think some rules are unfair," she said, her voice firm. "And sometimes doing what's right means breaking them." Coleman let out a harsh, humorless laugh. "If you can't follow the rules, then maybe this isn't the place for you," he said coldly. He straightened his posture, looking down at her with finality. "You're fired." A stunned silence filled the restaurant. Clara's breath caught in her throat. She had braced herself for pushback, but being fired over this? Over a single burger that was going to be thrown away? "You're firing me for giving away food that would have ended up in the trash?" she asked, disbelief thick in her voice. Coleman's expression remained impassive. "No," he said icily. "I'm firing you for questioning my authority. That's something I won't tolerate." Tears burned behind Clara's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Instead, she squared her shoulders, lifting her chin. "Then I'd rather lose my job than ignore my conscience," she said, her voice ringing through the restaurant with quiet conviction. Murmurs spread among the customers. Some whispered in support of Clara, while others simply watched in shock. Coleman, however, looked utterly unfazed. He saw this as nothing more than enforcing discipline. That's when Keanu, who had been silent all this time, finally stepped forward. He placed the untouched burger on the counter and turned to Coleman, his expression unreadable. "You know what you're doing is wrong," he said, his voice calm but filled with quiet authority. "This isn't about rules. It's about treating people with humanity." Coleman scoffed, though there was a flicker of unease in his demeanor. "And who are you to tell me how to act?" he sneered. "You're just a guy who couldn't afford a burger." Keanu didn't react. He simply held Coleman's gaze for a moment, then, without a word, turned and walked toward the restroom. Confused, the entire restaurant watched as he disappeared behind the door. Seconds ticked by. When he emerged, the tension in the room reached its breaking point. Gone were the tattered clothes and the scruffy beard. His hair was neatly styled, and his real identity was suddenly, unmistakably clear. A collective gasp rippled through the restaurant. The man Coleman had belittled and humiliated just moments ago wasn't just anyone. It was Keanu Reeves. A stunned silence fell over the room as realization hit. Customers stared, some pulling out their phones, others frozen in disbelief. Coleman's face drained of color as his body stiffened. This has to be some kind of joke," he stammered.